And now to discuss Latin America as well as what's happening in Canada, we are now joined live by Magdalena Diaz, a member of the May 1st Coalition in Toronto, and Paz Jurado, a member of solidarity group Apoyamos Chile, who is with us from Toronto as well. Thank you both for joining us today. Let's begin with Paz. We've been seeing heavy police repression in various cities across Chile at protests marking International Workers' Day. We've also seen, as I mentioned before, police arrest journalists and labor union leaders, which actually had a permit to be on the streets. What is your reaction to what's happening there?
Hello, I'm Paz. Since protest in October 2019, we have been seeing all the human rights violations already, the mutilation in the eyes, and all the government oppression to the people. So we are not surprised that that's happening now. And actually, this reflects why the people has taken to the streets since more than 6 months ago, because we don't have laws that protect the workers. And actually now, due to the pandemic time, the workers has been affected the most because the government is helping the big companies, but the workers has been fired and they don't have any help of the government of terms of the money. They just give to the 60% more poor of the people, just like 50,000 pesos, Chilean pesos, that is like 100 Canadian dollars. So you can't live with that. And more than 300,000 people has been fired. So that's why the people more than ever is taking to the streets, trying to protect themselves, doing everything safety, and as you said before, taking the distance and everything. But the government, they want just to reopen all the businesses, and they don't care about the health of the people.
Now, Magdalena, just to stay on Latin America for a bit, what do working people where you are in Canada think of the foreign policy of Justin Trudeau, who has actually allied with President Sebastián Piñera?
Well, in terms of the Justin Trudeau's decisions to close the border and migrant workers being really oppressed right now, we have been denouncing and we have been asking Justin Trudeau to take into account migrant workers here in Canada who make a huge amount of the workforce. Most of the time here in Canada, when they talk about labor force, they are referring to unionized, organized labor, and they don't take into account the many people who work under very precarious conditions, where labor laws are not really applied to them. They are in very dangerous situations. We just heard about 40 farm workers here close to Toronto that were diagnosed with COVID-19 and they were not getting the proper support and the proper health care because they don't qualify for things like that. So, in terms of Justin Trudeau, I mean, in Canada, we are very fortunate to have a lot of um, access to a lot of help, but we have really come to know the disparity and how different the situation is, whether you are part of a migrant working force or part of the already established, labor protected labor force. It's a very different scenario. And we today we launched a campaign here in Toronto for migrant workers and for awareness raising, so that people here in Canada know that the we're not all in it. One of the things that they have been talking about is we're all in this together, and we're not all in this together because some people are being affected in ways that are very, very sad.
Now, I would like to ask both of you, for our international audience, what are some of the most pressing issues which are affecting workers both in Canada and Chile? Paz, you can start.
Yes. Sorry, can you repeat the last question?
So, what are the most pressing issues that are affecting workers in Chile?
Well, first, we don't have a decent minimum wage. Also, we don't have the laws don't protect the workers. And now, during the pandemic time of the COVID-19, we can see that the people are lost their jobs or they has been laid off, so they don't receive any payment of the people that they work, and they don't receive help of the government. So now the families are really affected because they don't have money to buy their groceries or to pay the rent, anything. So that is the most hard part. And also I want to add something that is really important to us, that in lots of areas of Chile, the people don't have access to the water to wash their hands. So we know that the most important is wash your hands, but we don't have access to the water. So of course, it's not the same situation in all the places of the world.
Now, Magdalena, what can you tell us about Canada?
One thing I think that's really important to understand that Canada, the world knows Canada in a very different lens than we know Canada, living here and being so aware of the inequalities that exist. If you talk about the Canada where Indigenous communities live in, or you talk about the Canada where people with wealth live in, or you talk about the Canada where migrant workers are not accessing the labor standards that are there for everybody else. Like Canada is a good country if you happen to be in the right community and in the right, level of employment. But if you are, someone that's not documented, that doesn't have proper documentation to live in Canada, you are, giving to the community, you are paying taxes like everybody else, but you're not accessing the the supports that are there for everybody else. So it's not, Canada is not a country that is the same for everybody that lives here. And I think that's really important to know because, many people dream of migrating to Canada because it's they say the roads are paved with gold here. Well, it's just a few roads that are paved with gold if they are. And, I mean, that's just a figure, like something to kind of imagine. But really, most roads here are paved with, dirt and many stones.
Now, Magdalena, let me stay with you. Could you tell us what has been organized for this International Workers' Day as Canada continues to be under lockdown in many ways?
Yes, we for the last over 15 years, in Canada, a group of us, grassroots organizations, that have been doing a May Day rally, and we have taken to the streets. We have had a really good participation, that's been anywhere from a few thousands, and up, that have taken to the street, and we have been wanting to bring attention to May 1st as the day that we do celebrate International Workers' Day. As people may know, Canada and the US are, a couple of countries where May Day is not celebrated and, at a government level. So we have been wanting to bring attention to and awareness raising, to the fact that today is International Workers' Day. And well, because of the coronavirus, because of the lockdown, that did not stop us. So we have, Facebook, populated with a number of events that are taking place. We also have a YouTube account that's doing a playlist, and we are updating it constantly throughout the day with news from around the world. And we also have in the evening at 4 and at 7, we will have some live events, to commemorate today, because coronavirus is not going to keep us apart. We're, saying that unity is really important, and el pueblo unido.
Unity is important. Lastly, for both of you, what is your final message on this May Day to workers in Chile and in Latin America? Paz.
Yes, well, before I want to add that the pensions in Chile are really low, the minimum wage is really low, and the cost of the living is so high. So it's really hard to the people to live with that wage. And that's why also the people is fighting since October. And we are stand with the people in Chile, and we will still fighting for our rights. So the message from us to Chile is, please stay together. We are with you in this fight, and we are not resting until we have dignity, justice, and a good living for everyone, because it's not fair that the people, after they are working all their lives, they are in the streets because they doesn't have a decent pension to live. So we are together in this hasta que la dignidad se haga costumbre.
Until dignity becomes a norm. Magdalena.
I just want to mention the fact that, those really painful videos that you have been showing from Chile, they're not really that distant of a reality for us here in Canada when it comes to the Indigenous community. The Indigenous community has been fighting for the rights and for the right to land, the right to, autonomy, self-determination. And a message that I have to everybody, workers around the world, is to really inform yourself, to really become aware that when someone is talking about a particular place, like Canada, that there are some very sad inequalities happening here, and we really need to educate ourselves about the information.
We would like to thank you so much, both of you, for joining us here at Telesur English. Magdalena Diaz, a member of the May 1st Coalition in Toronto, and Paz Jurado, a member of solidarity group Apoyamos Chile. We have more stories coming up. Don't go away.